Welcome to Eye to Market, a web series designed to help you explore and navigate the successful path to market for your ophthalmic innovation. Welcome to Eye to Market. My name is Brian and I'll be your host. In today's episode, we're going to talk about navigating the regulatory pathway and how to plan for a successful submission. First off, when during the development process should an innovator be engaging with the FDA?
So the FDA operates as part of the federal government. It's there. It's ready to do things for the American public. The time a company should decide to go and engage with them is at a point when they need something from the FDA, whether that's having a question that they want answered, or whether they want to start a study and therefore need an IND, or whether they're ready to submit a marketing application, in which case they submit an NDA or a BLA. NDA being new drug application, BLA being biologic license application. But the FDA doesn't care about whether they get contacted or not until somebody wants something, and then they're happy to address it. So I think it's always helpful to have clearly in mind what questions you want to ask for the agency or what you want from the agency. Just telling them, when something's going to happen, I'm sorry, but the agency really doesn't care. They will deal with it at the point that you go and submit it. And you want to be as clear as possible about what your question is or what you want from the agency. If it's ambiguous, you're likely to get an ambiguous answer back from the agency, and that doesn't help you.
Right.
So you focus questions, you focus areas of discussion on what you want to get out of the conversation. Well, and equally, there's no reason to discuss things that you've already provided in writing. The agency is going to do their homework ahead of time. They're going to read the information that's submitted as any kind of briefing package, build from there, and direct your questions at what their responses are. Don't just repeat what was already provided to them in writing.
When we think about the FDA and we think about the multiple pathways that you can have in addressing a product, so you've got medical devices, OTC, you've got biologics, you've got drugs, you've got all kinds of pathways that things can travel. How would you recommend an innovator to think through their regulatory pathway and which agency or part of the agency to reach out to with those questions and to kind of establish their path up through to commercialization?
So I frequently got that type of question when I was at the FDA, but I actually was always surprised at it because usually there was only one pathway that was open to them. So if you wanted to study, if you had a drug or you had a biologic and you wanted to put it in humans, you needed an IND. There is no other type of application that you needed. If, on the other hand, you had a device and the difference between drug and device are clearly listed in the law, you can't alter what those are. If you had a device and you wanted to study it, you submit an IDE, investigational device exemption. So the investigational part just depended on what you were. Then when you wanted the marketing application, you could either be an NDA if you were a drug, and if you're a drug, you can't be anything other than an NDA to market. If you were a biologic, you had to be a biologic application, so a BLA. And if you were a device, you were either a device that had been on the market prior to 1976 or something similar to it, in which case you were a 510K, or you were new, in which case you were either de novo or a PMA. But all of those were, virtually anybody at the agency could tell you what you were because it was a single pathway.
Gotcha.
A little bit of ambiguity in a 505B1 versus 505B2. So within the NDA, there is a 505B1 when you have all the information you need, or a 505B2 if you're missing pieces of information that you know somebody else has already put in the public domain, and you don't have the right to reference it, but you're going to basically borrow that information. So it's only if you intend to borrow somebody else's information that you are a 505B2, Otherwise, you're a 505(b)(1).
Gotcha.
And that's pretty much all your options.
When you're advising clients now and when you were advising folks as a member of the FDA, how would you guide them with direction to ensure their compliance with GLP and GMP manufacturing and discovery work from the very beginning?
GLPs, GMPs, what they mean, good laboratory practices, good manufacturing processes, are written down in the Code of Federal Regulations. It's obviously worth reading the Code of Federal Regulations. Yes, it's dry, but that's what you're expected to go and follow. It is not uncommon for people to say, do I have to follow the GLP or GMP? And we'll ask the agency. They are a set of regulations, they are detailed, and sometimes you don't need, the information that you're collecting does not need to be done under good laboratory practices or good manufacturing process. In other words, there is some deviation that occurred for good reason. So it doesn't technically meet, say, good laboratory practices, but it's pretty close, and you think the difference, what you didn't do, that won't make any difference in the data. In which case, the agency suggests you submit that data. If it's good science, it's good science, and explain how it deviated from good laboratory practices and what the reason was of why it deviated, and explain why it didn't make a difference to the data. And in most cases, the agency will accept data, even if it's not GLP or GMP, if you can explain where it deviates, why it deviates, and how it doesn't make a difference.
Were there any common instances where a lack of GLP or GMP was more often noted and accepted by the FDA? Were there certain situations that you saw repeatedly?
I'll give you the reverse, the thing
Okay.
that held people up the most. And that was having a written procedure. You have your own written procedures and then not following your own written procedures. Far and away, that was the biggest reason why somebody would basically get dinged for not being in GMP or not being GLP thing, is if they did not follow their own written procedures.
Thank you. Because that's a great segue to my follow-up question, which is, what are some of the most common mistakes that you saw people make that our innovators could try to avoid by listening to you today in their submissions and their discussions with the FDA?
And I think that is the biggest one. I think
Okay.
you write down what you're going to do, and then you have to go and do it. It follows through with protocols. It follows through with manufacturing. It follows through with animal studies. Write down what you're planning on doing, and then actually do it, and then report what you did. I think the companies need to not be afraid to ask the FDA particular things, listen to the answer, but more importantly, make sure that you know the reason behind the answer. The FDA doesn't do anything without a reason. That reason may be the law says that, a regulation says that, good science says that, it's a particular policy that has been followed and there's very clear precedent. But there's always a reason. And if you don't understand the reason, it's difficult to change what you're doing and make it what the agency is likely to accept unless you understand the reason. So ask about the reason.
When you think about the submissions to the FDA, and when as a regulator, when you're looking at these submissions, what are the endpoints or the values within these submissions that are most important to you as an evaluator, someone who's reviewing these submissions? What are you really looking for?
Well, you're always looking at ultimately at the safety and efficacy of the medical product that you're bringing to the patients, because no matter what kind of medical product it is, you want to make sure that it brings value to the patients and that it is not harming the patients. So those are two underlying basic concepts that go across all of the regulators around the world. It doesn't matter if you're in Japan or in US or in Singapore, those are the concepts. Now, how we evaluate it sometimes varies, hopefully not a lot, because there's a lot of global efforts, as you know, to unify the regulatory approaches. What is very important is to make sure that we have consistency across the field. What I mean by that is that the efforts that standardization organizations and the international bodies put into consensus and standards development is being utilized across all of the medical products. So for example, if you're coming to the United States, FDA, since we're in US today, I would recommend for anybody who is considering putting together an application, making sure that they understand what standards are applicable, whether they are at the national or international level, what guidances are available, and both this is another very simple concept that most people don't get. There is something called horizontal and vertical, both for standards and guidances. And so when you're putting together a submission, I'm going to give you an example to make it easy.
That'd be wonderful.
Let's say you're looking to put in an IOL. So for IOL, you would look at vertical, which is, how do I do a clinical trial to evaluate EDOF? There's actually a standard for that. But there's also a standard which would be horizontal, which is biocompatibility. So something that goes across many, many different devices. And as you are putting together the application, you want to make sure that you hit both, that you take your time and figure out everything that is documented, because then you're 10 steps ahead. You want to make sure that you're not reinventing the wheel, because if you say that you are consistent with the standards, global standards, FDA guidance, you don't need to spend 100 pages and umpteen months proving a new way to evaluate something that the world has already agreed is the best way to do it. Now, in addition to standards and guidance, there are also workshops that are being published, papers where FDA, presents their latest views and opinions that haven't really made it to the guidance yet.
What I'm hearing is it's really important to engage with the FDA early in the process, so that you have access to all of that. Because we may know as an innovator or a member of the community where to go for the guidance is and where to find that information, but these newer pieces that might be coming up through but not made it into a guidance yet, that's where the FDA or the EMEA or another governing body might be able to point us in the right direction in a pre-IND meeting or just a concept meeting to really understand what we want to be looking at.
Yes, but that would sort of be a waste of your time and their time, because they can point you to things which are in public domain. So it is worth your time to do due diligence and identify everything in the public domain, because you're going to have a 1-hour meeting with the FDA, and it is to your advantage to maximize the time to ask unique questions to which nobody has an answer. So there's really... I always say maximize the meeting.
Okay.
Because garbage in, garbage out.
100%.
Figure out everything that's available in the public domain as far as everything that's published as a standard guidance. We have AI that can help you find anything very, very fast. So any workshop, any consensus like IMDRF or any other international body, any task force, for example, in IOL, there's AO task force papers that were published. Figure it out. Make sure that you understand everything that is known and everything that's being worked on, and then utilize that to maximize your time with the FDA to ask very specific questions that are not, answers for which are not available based on the public domain.
That's great advice. That's great advice. So what if we are developing something with an innovative approach that has different endpoints? How does that factor into the process?
So that's the unique thing about CCOI. This is the only organization in the world that brings together every stakeholder in the medical product ecosystem to work together in a pre-competitive space in order to find solutions for innovative medical products in order to get them to patients around the world expeditiously. Right now, CCOI has 17 working groups. We are similarly structured to standards. Some are horizontal and some are vertical, disease-specific, such as diabetic retinopathy, AMD, glaucoma, etc. And each working group is working extremely hard with the KOLs and industry members and patients around the world to come up with consensus on key novel technologies. Because unless we have gold standard clinical endpoints, we cannot bring that technology. So when we were discussing FDA, when you come to a regulator, ultimately the reviewer has to compare your performance to something that exists and validated, and that's what we call gold standard.
Okay.
A lot of people, my team brought the first ever autonomous AI to market in any field of medicine. AAO has preferred practice patterns that clearly delineated adequate performance and for referral for diabetic retinopathy. So that's why when AI for diagnosing diabetic retinopathy came in as a device, my team had something to compare it to. So at CCOI, we have taken that lesson and are proactively creating gold standard consensus for all of the cutting edge, innovative technologies that aren't on the market yet. So one of the biggest areas we're working on right now, for example, is oculomics.
Okay.
And we are transforming eye from just being used for ophthalmic medical products to becoming the window to systemic health. So we're partnering with neurologists, cardiologists, et cetera, so that we can find endpoints that would be appropriate for diagnosing, let's say, Alzheimer's or cardiovascular conditions, but the concept is the same. So if you are pausing during your process and you're plotting your path and you realize in that exercise that there are no clinical endpoints that your particular product can compare it to, you should try to reach out to CCOI and see if there's a working group that is working on that. For example, we just submitted novel endpoints for AI for AMD. So we're working very hard to truly innovate the innovation.
That's wonderful. It's good to know that there's a group out there trying to set a new trend. Thank you.